My name is John Crane. My name is John Crane. I have a PhD from Vanderbilt. But the thing that really got me interested in climate change is something that I know a lot of people in Florida this week can relate to. It was a hurricane and, historic flooding afterwards. It was when I was a child, Hurricane Danny in 1997. And I remember learning more on my little battery powered radio after the storm from Dr. Bill Williams on the radio about climate change and sea level rise than I'd ever learned in Alabama public schools at the time. And that moment sort of cemented in my mind like climate change is, and sea level rise, particularly along the Gulf Coast and the east coast of Florida as well, is the big issue, you know, that I should focus on. And also thinking about, I didn't learn very much, if anything, about this in school. That's what tied me to education. And, I could go on and on about my research, but my personal research has always been, you know, how can the individual impact the climate both positively and negatively? And I think that's that sort of small scale climate action is the thing that absolutely everybody can do. And if we all agree together to do it, we can literally change the world. I think that's the key for the future. Emily, I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, that was great, John. Okay, so we'll just give a quick overview of our agenda for today. We are going to talk a little bit about Subject to Climate and the free resources we have to offer for teachers. Then we're going to go more specifically into some resources we have for Florida. We'll talk a little about our scientific review process and explain how every single resource on our site is reviewed by our scientist task force. And then we'll have a time at the end for questions and answers. So before we take a tour of the site, we're going to do a quick poll. What is the biggest challenge that you face in incorporating climate change education into your classroom? These are the things that we most commonly hear. Lack of time. Teachers are busy. They don't have time to find climate change resources. Inaccessible resources. Maybe they exist, but they're hard to use, they're complicated, they're outdated, or possibly they cost too much money. It's a controversial subject. It can be seen as a partisan issue. It often leaves people feeling emotionally wrought after learning about climate change, especially our youngest learners. Low teacher confidence. Climate change is complicated. It's an interdisciplinary topic, and teacher preparation programs don't often cover it. And finally, inflexible curricula. Teachers struggle to incorporate climate change into their jam-packed curriculum because they have to cover so many standards and they don't have a lot of flexibility about what they teach. So Lauren, I think, is going to add the poll. I know we don't have a ton of people here live, but even if you're not a classroom teacher, we'd love to hear what you think is the biggest problem, the biggest challenge that you face. So Lauren, I don't know if you're able to share the results, and maybe everyone can see them and I just can't see them.
Yeah, so we have one for C, it being a controversial subject. One for E, the curriculum being inflexible. And then also lack of time.
So the good news is no matter what you answered, this is what Subject to Climate has set out to fix. We have tried to make a website that will address all of these issues. We are a 100% free platform. Our lessons, our activities, our teaching guides, and our curated resources are all designed for teachers. And we also have professional development opportunities for teachers to access through our site. Our mission is to empower all educators. So regardless of the subject that you teach or the grade level that you teach, there's something on our site for you. A lot of times people think of climate change falling into the science curriculum only, but Subject to Climate has made a wealth of resources for math teachers, for social studies teachers, art teachers. We even have PE lessons on there that incorporate climate change topics. And they're integrated easily into the curriculum and aligned to standards that you already have to teach. And then our vision is student-centered. We envision a future where every child learns about climate change and becomes a steward of our planet. So echoing what John said, if students learn about it and they feel invested in the topic, we feel sure that we can make a positive change in our future. So let's take a look at the site. So SubjectToClimate has a bunch of different sections, but we are going to start with lessons by teachers, and then we'll go back to the resource database to take a look at some Florida-centered resources that we have. All of our lesson plans, worksheets, activities are designed by teachers and written by teachers. You can filter them by grade level, subject, and even standard. Today, we're going to take a look at a 3 through 5 lesson. And like I said, I want to teach it in a math class. And then I'm going to add a keyword to make it even more specific. I want to teach my students about plastic. So this lesson, while it teaches students about single-use plastic and how they impact climate change, also teaches students about multiplication. So we're covering those multiplication standards while we're also teaching about a climate change topic. If you scroll down, you can take a quick preview of the entire lesson plan. You can take a look at the accompanying materials, including our teacher slideshow, which is fully accessible and ready to use. It includes all kinds of activities and discussion questions for teachers to use immediately. Upon opening it, you can pull it up and just teach it in your classroom. We also have an SEL component to every lesson so that students can connect the emotions that they're feeling when they see an image like this of a beautiful beach being polluted to action so that they don't just feel powerless. And then we also have excellent differentiation. So as you know, if you're a classroom teacher, you may be teaching 4th grade math, but you're going to have students in your class who are still working on 3rd grade skills. You're going to have students who are ready to move on to 5th grade skills. All of our lessons are differentiated so that you can choose activities that will help the students in your class to meet similar goals. So let's take a look at the 3rd grade math problems. So we're thinking about plastic water bottles and how many disposed plastic water bottles a group of people could use in a month. This way, teachers can introduce the concept, but still work on the multiplication problems. We're going to scroll over to the student document so you can see we actually have fully aligned worksheets to work with every single lesson. These are ready to go. You can print them. They're also digital. So if you want to use them with student devices, they're ready to go. Here you can see the standards that this is aligned to because it's a math lesson. It really sticks to the math standards, but it also has supporting standards so you can bring in some writing elements.
Right.
You'll be able to take a quick look at the teaching tips, positives, prerequisites, differentiation ideas, and then each of our lessons also has a scientist note. And John's going to talk about that a little bit later. We're going to look at the resource database and he'll give us a little walkthrough of what the scientist review looks like. One other great thing is that you can actually see who wrote this lesson. Unlike a lot of curricula, this is written by a teacher who is truly a teacher who lives in South Jersey. You can see other lessons that she's written for SubjectToClimate. If you like the way that her lesson was designed, you might want to check out other things that she wrote. The next thing we're going to take a quick look at is our news for students. This is an ideal activity for a bell ringer. If you don't have a place to put this into the curriculum, you know you have those first few minutes of your class when people are settling in, you just pull this up, have students use them right away. The news articles are extremely relevant. You can see these were all posted this morning. One of them is actually about Hurricane Milton. And then we also have a backlog that goes back, I think we have around 800 articles now. So let's take a look at what these articles look like. You can post them directly to Google Classroom or send a link out to your students. And you can also adjust the reading level. So you can have your students in one classroom read the same article on a 5th grade and an 11th grade reading level. That way everybody gets the same material, but they get it at their own pace. If they're unfamiliar with a word, they can click on it to see a definition. And finally, they can Do a quick comprehension check to make sure they actually read the article and that they understood what it meant. Each of these are aligned to a Common Core standard. You'll also see that there are related resources at the bottom. So if you want to do more, your students got really engaged on that topic, you can look and see, here's a video, here's some artwork, all kinds of other things you can show your students. I'm going to very briefly show you our professional development database because this is just such an amazing resource for teachers. We have 3 free courses that are self-paced that teachers can take to learn more about how to incorporate climate change into the curriculum. These were developed by SubjectToClimate and they're completely free to use. But we also have listings of other webinars, workshops, conferences that are going on all over the country. You can see these are some new ones from New Jersey, Wisconsin, Oregon. And even if you don't want to leave your own home, you can look at an asynchronous webinar and find something that would fit your needs. Now, one of the problems that a lot of teachers face when they come to our site is that there's so much information. They don't know where to start. And that's where teacher guides come in. We have all these teacher guides that are for math, ELA, reading, but also about topics. So we're going to take a quick look at one that's really relevant, I think, right now to anyone facing hurricanes. Whoops. This was an effort in collaboration with the American Red Cross. And this whole entire guide is devoted to disaster preparedness and how to teach your students about disasters. So if you're familiar with American Red Cross's Prepare with Pedro program, this is an excellent program for kindergarten through 2nd grade, a group of students that we don't often get to address these kinds of big issues with. There are books, there are activity guides. There are also a bunch of SEL resources to help them process things that they're facing when these disasters strike. And you can see at the top, there are also a bunch of other interesting things for secondary. There's also a really amazing app that the American Red Cross has that you can download and access all kinds of great information about extreme weather. I think Lauren's going to add this to the chat so that you all can take a look at it. This is really, truly a great resource. All right, and now we're going to take a look at some Florida resources. So our resource library is made up of 2,635, and who knows, it could even change this morning. We're always adding new resources. Resources from external providers. So these are not things that we make in-house. You might see things here from PBS. You might see something from NOAA. You might see something from NASA on our database. They come from external providers, but teachers take a look at the resource and they decide which grade level is this best for? What classroom could I teach this in? And then give some tips about how to actually incorporate it into a lesson. So maybe it's just a 2-minute video. And in your teaching tips, you would see, this is a perfect thing to teach about if you're learning about deforestation. Use this as a thought piece before you launch into an experiment, that sort of thing. So today we'll look at some Florida specific ones. We're going to look for a middle school resource, and you can see that you can filter by location. So we'll filter down all the way to the south, and you will see that we actually have 19 resources for Florida for middle school. Today, I want to take a look at this one. It's a youth climate story about hurricane damage and climate strikes. This comes from one of our providers, ACE, that does a lot of great work highlighting youth activists. So this one in particular is a video where a climate activist tells about her experience with trying to do some community organizing in Miami. But it also includes a lesson plan, a weather mapping activity, and an art project. So if this looks like something you'd want to use, you can click right here on the button and it will take you straight to the resource. You can see the video, you can see the different activities, and this is the one that caught my eye. Lesson plan, Hope After Hurricanes. So if you take a look at this one, you can see that there's a teacher document and a student document available as a Google Doc and a PDF. Really great activity. Tells you how long it takes to do it, and it gives you the learning outcomes and the standards that are aligned. All right, going back to the site, I'm going to now finally hand it over to John so I can stop talking. So he can explain a little bit about why we have scientist notes for every resource on our site and what our science review process looks like.
Alrighty, so we have a scientist note on absolutely every resource, every lesson plan on the site, right? And, we have a team of all, very knowledgeable, real climate scientists that are, you know, if I do a resource or a lesson plan, the first thing I'll do is I'll read it. This one's a video, I'll watch the video, right? And I will ensure that, take notes, assuring that absolutely every claim that's made in there, most of our resources have, real, journal articles that they're sourced from. And I'll go to that journal article. I'll make sure that the resource, accurately represents what the journal says. If it doesn't have direct sources cited, some of the resources for younger children aren't focused on current research as much. I'll go to IPCC report and I'll make sure, hey, does this agree with the basic science of climate change, point by point? And then the biggest thing to me that where I think our scientists, this is our biggest strength on these, is I can't read this one on this resource on my screen, but the thing that I look at very closely is, are there any misconceptions that people may have about climate change that are sort of in this resource, and that if one, there was someone who didn't know anything about climate change, that they could come away with the wrong idea, or two, if there's someone that sort of has that politicized view about climate change, that they could point to that and say, see, this is an issue with the science of climate change. So I make sure that all of those, if they're there, that they're clear, that no one can have any misconception, that the science is clear, because let's face it, the climate system is a very complex system, but I work very hard to help teachers to make climate change not be complicated to teach, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Emily, pass it back to you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, something that I thought about a lot when I was teaching is how much time it took me to vet a resource and make sure things were up to date, that the data was accurate, that it came from an unbiased source. And having these scientist notes on every one of our resources is just such a valuable add to all of our content. Teachers can look at that and feel good about it. They know that this has been reviewed by someone who knows what they're talking about. I didn't always feel sure about every single aspect of climate change that I understood, but when I look at the notes, I can see, oh, this is how I can make sure that my students understand it and that I'm relaying that information in the accurate way. So another thing I wanted to show you is how we can look by topic, even if there's not something related technically to Florida. We know like sea level rise, as John mentioned, is such an important topic right now along the entire Gulf Coast and all coastal regions of the United States. So if I'm trying to find something for my kindergarten class about sea level rise, I can easily just use the keyword in the grade filter and find a resource that can explain it in a really simple way. So this is an experiment for kindergarten through first and second grade to show them how you understand sea level rise. And hopefully you can see this on the screen, but it's a really easy little experiment where they take a plastic bottle, a little bit of clay, and a straw. And when they heat the bottle up, they can see that the water expands and the water rises up the straw. So this is the simplest way to convey this to very young children, right? They're able to see it with their own eyes. They can understand that it's affecting the world around them right now. The sea levels are rising because our temperatures are getting warmer. So simplest way to explain it. This would be something you could really easily incorporate into a science class when you're talking about thermal expansion. So what if you don't have a chance to put that in your science curriculum? Here's a perfect example of how you can incorporate it into your reading. If you're teaching in kindergarten, first or second grade, you surely have a read aloud time. And maybe you can use that time to show an ebook like this one, Adesh's Deep Sea Dive. This talks about how sea level rise is impacting people in all coastal communities, even in places like Sri Lanka, where Adesh is from. So students can understand that the problems they face in Florida are being faced by children all over the world. This is impacting people everywhere. Okay. With that, let's return to our slides. And I want to tell you a little bit about what Subject to Climate is doing all over the United States. We have developed hubs in a variety of states, and you'll notice a pattern. All the states we have right now are in the north. So we don't have anything in the south right now. So me in Louisiana, John in Alabama, we would love to see something in the south. I will show you just very briefly what our state hubs look like. They are websites that are aligned to that state's core curriculum standards.
Mhm.
So we know that states have their own standards. We use Common Core as a guide, but every state has their own set of standards. So the amazing thing about this is our whole resource database is here. All of the things that here we go. You can see all 2,635 resources are here, but unlike the core site, they are aligned to the New York standards. So you can see that this is not standards that you would see on our site. These are things that teachers in New York would be able to teach with. If this is something that you are interested in and you would like to learn more about, please contact me. I'll have my email address at the end of the slideshow. And I think Lauren can put it in the chat as well. We would love to hear from you if you know about organizations or funders that would help us make that a reality for Florida or the Gulf Coast region. Okay, now I would love to show you guys how to make a account on the site. So Lauren is going to put Subject to Climate's website address in the chat. And you can go right up here. You can see I've already created an account, and I'm going to show you one of the greatest things that we have in our account is the My Library feature. So things that I wanted to teach later, I have bookmarked, and now I can always find them again. So if you run across something that you're not going to use today, but maybe you know you're going to use in 6 months when you're coming up on a unit about energy, you can bookmark it, and you'll always have it in your library. So you can refer back to it anytime and refresh your memory about what you'd like to teach. And then I wanted to open it up to you all to have some questions, or if you have any ideas on how you could see incorporating some of the resources that you saw today into your curriculum tomorrow. I'll also move it to this screen so that you can sign up for our newsletter. There's a QR code here. If you want to stay up to date with what Subject to Climate is working on, you are welcome to join our newsletter. It is completely free. And maybe this would be a good time to add to the chat where you're located and what you teach. I'd love to see if anybody has any crossover about where you're located or what areas you teach. John, did you want to add anything else here at the end? Is there anything I didn't cover?
I mean, I think the biggest key to all of our resources on subject to climate, and the thing that I'll always say, right? And this is the thing why I strongly believe in our organization. You know, why I've worked tirelessly with subject to climate is because we have so many resources that are created by great external sources that we've aggregated. We have so many lesson plans that are created by actual teachers. And so you know they will align with curriculum that you may have. But then, we have a team of climate scientists, and we very carefully review everything. And, you know, personally, I think that's a very powerful resource. And I think that, you know, education is the key to solving the climate crisis because if you don't know about a problem, what are you going to do to solve it, right? And I know there are so many great educators out there. You know, I've spoken with quite a few in the Gulf Coast region, both from here in Alabama and in Escambia County, Florida, that are trying to incorporate this into their daily lesson plans. And I think with the young people, their engagement, I think we can already see positive change in a big way from our efforts here at STC. So that's all that I would have to add, to be honest.
Okay. So can you hear me? I don't know.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, I wasn't sure I could even speak. I was sending things in the chat. So yeah, I'm super excited about your platform. It is awesome. So, just as a quick background, and it's in the chat, I was a Montessori teacher for many years with kids two and a half through 15. So I was able to do a lot, starting in the 1990s with kids on all these topics, right? But all my friends who were educators that weren't they were in public schools and whatnot, just they were like, we can't do any of this. We can't. So anyway, but this is such an amazing platform. Now I'm working with an international nonprofit as with educators, and our whole vision is on education for sustainability and peace. So I would like to see, maybe we do these general meetings and also concept dialogue meetings online. So maybe, so you can join us and share about the platform. I will definitely talk with the executive team. I'm president, and we have an executive team here in North America that does a lot, of things. So, but one of my questions is, do you have like Spanish or other languages that we can share? Because we have, directors in Europe and, a lot of Spanish speakers, even in Florida. So, yeah.
We absolutely do. So
Okay, awesome.
yes, let me show you. Let's see if we'll hop back to, we'll hop back to the site and I will show you how you can change the language on the site.
Mhm. Okay.
So when you're looking either on the external providers database or on our lesson plans, you can look right here to language and you can
Oh,
see
wow.
we actually have resources in many
Oh
languages.
my gosh, that's so
So
awesome.
it is great. And obviously some of these we might only have one or two, but Spanish is one that we have a bunch. So
Okay,
you can
great.
either type in Spanish or you can click here and you can see we have 86 resources in Spanish. We also have lesson plans, and just as a sneak peek, they are not live yet, but we're about to publish 54 new lesson plans. They're all going to be published basically on one day. And there's a real focus on Spanish units. So we have a bunch for Spanish as well. And let's see, we are actually in the midst of updating our filters here. So you'll have a language filter on the site as well. But you can see right here, this is a really interesting lesson about, here we go. So it's about the consequences of climate change, but also indigenous cosmovision.
Mhm.
So it's a really interesting lesson. And the teacher who wrote it, she's so fantastic. Her name is Liz. And she's a Spanish high school teacher, but she's taught different levels of Spanish. She's also worked with K-6, and she's just written a bunch of Spanish language lessons for us that are really excellent quality.
Wonderful. Oh, okay. And John, I just finished my master's degree online at DePaul on value creating education for global citizenship. But one of the things that I'm wondering about with your science, which I really advocate, that students do their own research, even when they're really young, learning to look for, what they can learn. But there's always this issue about the citations where so many are in journals and whatnot that you can't access. And even now, after I'm no longer, I'm graduated, I have, when I'm looking and doing research, it's, yeah, a lot of stuff you can't access. There's more and more open access stuff, but I'm wondering about, what you provide in terms of citations that we can use.
So and I definitely understand what you're saying. It is an issue, for people who aren't attached to university. Because of
Right.
course I'm spoiled having access to everything. But uh, there are uh there are a great number of our resources that do have open source sources cited. And I made a little note in the chat to your question, but I think the biggest thing that I would say, sort of as advice for a teacher, if this makes sense,
Mhm.
is if you have a source that is behind a paywall, uh, I would suggest that, before you present it to the class, that you as a teacher reach out to the author,
Mm.
because I know I've had numerous people that reach out to me on articles that I've published,
Mhm.
and most any scientist will share you a PDF that can be, shared freely if you reach out to them. And I know that's a tough step, but the scientific journals, that's the economic process that
Right.
is a lot more open now than it was just 10 years ago, but
Right.
still I know it can be a big challenge for teachers.
Thank you. And John, I is there a bio in I didn't, I didn't see an individual bio for each of you, but can you tell me again where you're based, where you teach?
So yes, ma'am. So I am in Mobile, Alabama,
Okay. Mhm.
and I'm actively teaching at University of South Alabama. So
Okay. Okay, so I can find you there. All right.
I mean,
Okay.
to be honest, the easiest way to reach out to me is to go to the STC website. And I don't know if Emily wants to pull it back up, but I know you can see our whole team
Okay,
on there.
that's true.
Yeah. And yeah, so the scientist reviewers, Archibong, our fearless leader, uh, is, an amazing climate scientist. And we have a very strong team, and we all work together on, making sure that these resources are totally scientifically correct and excellent. So
Awesome. Okay, and finally, Emily, I'm really interested in helping create a hub here, especially Florida, because I think we're going to be like I personally believe we're going to lead the whole idea of climate change in the US and maybe the world, because all my friends from around are going, "Are you okay?" They've been watching it all over the world, and
Mhm.
it's going to be impacting, the world. I mean, it's already impacting. I've seen some of your programs there. Anything I can do to help bring that, especially to Florida. And I wonder about the Volo Foundation, whether they'll get involved. Personally, our nonprofit is linked with the Earth Charter International. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but we do scholarships. Right now, we have a group of young people in Ethiopia, but their youth leadership course is awesome. Of course, it's not free, but they also have a high school one that's less expensive. I think right now the price here is like $200. No, like no, yeah, for the global south, it's 149. They've doubled it because they have so many people from China that have joined. It's
Mhm.
really an amazing movement, but it's a global group of young people, and it really kind of transforms their thinking. But anyway, I wanted to mention that about the Earth Charter.
Yeah.
And there's things I think that, again, are you familiar with it? There may be,
I have heard about it. Yes.
yeah.
We're not partnered with them, but they're on my radar for sure.
Right. I mean, they're truly amazing, and they're educate. Again, the prices have all gone up because they've had to increase their platform to, bring in more teacher. They have a teacher's course that I did, certificate program, and they're doing a lot of free podcasts with all kinds of people that are involved in sustainability and peace and whatnot. So they're a good resource if teachers are aware of it. And they actually have this whole program right now of or charter seals for schools where they can introduce these principles. So anyway, I've talked a lot. You probably need to, maybe, I don't know if there are other people that might want to speak up, but again, I'll be in touch. And
Definitely, please reach
yeah.
out. Thank you. I love hearing all about that. And I would love to connect more and talk about Florida. You know, like I said, John and I are in the deep South. We want to see something in the South. We have a lot of action happening in the Northeast, which is great. We want that to continue, but we'd love to do something for the teachers here where we're seeing a lot
Yeah.
of impacts.
Right. And I think you must know that there's been a back and forth for a while. You couldn't mention climate change, and
Yes.
our governor, which we hope is not going to be here much longer, you know, you can't use the word biodiversity. It's like, okay, it's like he keeps shifting, right? But you couldn't talk about climate change. Well, he's gone kind of moved away from that. But yeah, the standards, and oh, I should mention that a longtime friend of mine who has founded a public Montessori school in Miami. It's actually like a charter school, but by two teachers that were Montessori in public and weren't able to do Montessori really in this class. So they have actually created for Montessori materials linked to the state standards. So they have done that, which I think is very helpful to a lot of people because I don't know, I mean, it does has to do with the materials of Montessori and that what they're teaching. So it might be something to help you in trying to align, but you've already done it in other areas, so maybe you
No,
don't need
that sounds great. We'd love to talk more about like Montessori. That's something I think would be really interesting to talk about. Be a
Okay.
good discussion.
All right.
Well, we're happy to stay on if there are any other questions or if anybody would like to talk for a little bit. That is the end of our presentation, but if anybody has other questions or just wants to chat about getting climate change into your curriculum, we're happy to stay around for a few more minutes.